training, tuning, and evaluating machine learning models. Introduction. You've picked your data. You've picked a machine learning model, so why isn't it working yet? That's because picking the model is only step one. The real magic and the real work happens during training, tuning, and evaluation. This is the part of the machine learning pipeline where a model actually learns from data, gets adjusted until it performs well, and then gets tested to see if it's actually any good. In this video, we're going to walk through the entire process: how to choose the right model for your problem, what actually happens mathematically and conceptually when a model trains, how hyperparameters get tuned, and finally, how we measure whether a model is genuinely useful or just memorizing the answers. Let's get into it. Choosing a model. Let's start at the very beginning. How do you even choose which model to use? The first question to ask is simple. Is your data labeled or not? If every example in your dataset comes with a known answer attached to it, that's supervised learning. Think of an email that's already tagged as spam or not spam, or a house that already has a sale price attached to it. If there are no labels at all, and you're just handing the model raw data and asking it to find structure on its own, that's unsupervised learning. The classic example being clustering, where you group similar data points together without ever telling the model what the right groups are. If you're in supervised learning territory, the next question is, are you predicting a category or a number? Predicting a category, like spam versus not spam, or sorting images into cat, dog, or mouse, is classification. Predicting a continuous number, like a house price or a diamond's value, is regression. Once you know your category, you've got a short list of models to consider. For classification, you might reach for logistic regression, support vector machines, or naive Bayes for simpler problems, or a random forest or a neural network for something more complex. For regression, linear regression and ridge regression are common starting points, with decision trees, random forests, or neural networks available when the relationships in your data are more complicated. But the task type isn't the only thing that matters. You also need to think about how much data you actually have, how much you need to be able to explain the model's decisions. This matters a lot in fields like healthcare or finance, and how much computing power you're working with. A neural network might be the theoretically best choice, but if you only have a few hundred data points and a laptop, a simpler model is often the smarter, more practical pick. The goal at this stage isn't to lock in one single model. It's to build a shortlist of reasonable candidates. You'll compare them properly once you get to the evaluation stage, which we'll cover later in this video. Model training. Now for the heart of this video, what does it actually mean to train a model? Before any training happens, you split your full dataset into three separate parts: a training set, a validation set, and a testing set. A common split is around 70% for training, 15% for validation, and 15% for testing. The training set is what the model actually learns from. The validation set is used along the way to check whether the model is learning something generalizable, without ever being used to directly update the model's parameters. And the testing set is kept completely separate, untouched, until the very end, when we want an honest, unbiased measurement of how good the model really is. Now, here's the core idea of training, no matter which model you're using. Training means adjusting the model's internal parameter values so that its predictions get closer and closer to the true, correct answers. Some simpler models, like basic regression or naive Bayes, can calculate their best parameters directly using a mathematical formula in one shot. But many models, especially logistic regression and virtually all deep learning models, learn iteratively through a repeating cycle. Let's walk through that cycle. Step 1 is initialization. Before training starts, the model's parameters need some starting values. Instead of setting them all to 0, they're typically assigned small random values. There's also a shortcut called transfer learning, where instead of starting from scratch, you start from the parameters of a model that's already been trained on a related task, which can save an enormous amount of training time. Step 2 is the forward pass. The training data gets fed through the model using its current parameter values, and the model produces predictions. Step 3 is loss computation. Now we need to measure how wrong those predictions were. This is where a loss function comes in, a mathematical way of scoring the gap between what the model predicted and what the true answer actually was. One of the most common loss functions, especially for regression tasks, is the mean squared error, which you can see rendered on screen. In plain terms, it takes the difference between every prediction and its true value, squares that difference so negative and positive errors don't cancel out, and larger errors get punished more, and then averages all of those squared differences together. Critically, this loss gets calculated on both the training set and the validation set, because if both are decreasing together, that's a strong sign the model is genuinely learning rather than just memorizing. Step 4 is the backward pass. This is where an optimization algorithm, almost always some flavor of gradient descent, figures out exactly how much each individual parameter in the model contributed to that total error. Think of it like a bowl with a ball rolling down toward the lowest point, as shown in the visual. The lowest point represents the smallest possible loss, and gradient descent is the method for figuring out which direction to nudge each parameter to roll closer to that minimum. Step 5 is the parameter update. Using the information from the backward pass, every parameter in the model gets nudged slightly in the direction that reduces the overall loss. And step 6 is simply repeat. Steps 2 through 5 get repeated over and over for a set number of iterations called epochs. Sometimes training stops early, a technique fittingly called early stopping, if the loss stops improving by any meaningful amount, so you're not wasting time and computing power for negligible gains. By the end of this loop, if everything goes well, you'll see both the training loss and the validation loss steadily decreasing and converging, which is exactly what's shown in that final graph. That's the visual signature of a model that is actually learning. Hyperparameter tuning and cross-validation. While a model is being trained, there's a second layer of decisions happening above it: hyperparameters. Hyperparameters are settings that you, the data scientist, choose before training even begins. Things like how many layers a neural network has, how many units are in each layer, how many epochs to train for, or how fast the model should adjust its parameters at each step. These are different from the model's internal parameters, which the model learns on its own during training. Hyperparameters are the dials you set going in. There's no perfect formula for choosing hyperparameters. A common and very practical approach is to borrow an architecture that's already known to work well on a similar dataset or problem, and then adjust from there. Hyperparameter tuning usually happens after an initial round of training. You train the model, evaluate how it performs, adjust the hyperparameters based on what you saw, and then retrain to see if things actually improved. It's its own loop, layered right on top of the training loop we just covered. One more concept that ties into this: cross-validation. Instead of splitting your data into training, validation, and testing sets just once, cross-validation splits the data multiple times into different combinations. training and evaluating the model on each split. A very common version of this is k-fold cross-validation, shown in the visual, where the data gets divided into, say, 5 folds, and the model is trained and tested 5 separate times, with a different fold acting as the test set each time. At the end, you average the results across all folds. Why bother? Because relying on just one lucky or unlucky split of your data can give you a misleading picture of how good your model really is. Averaging across multiple folds gives you a much more trustworthy, stable estimate of performance. Model evaluation. You've trained your model, tuned your hyperparameters. Now it's time to find out if the model is actually any good. That's model evaluation. For classification tasks, one of the most common ways to visualize performance is the confusion matrix, shown here. It breaks every prediction into one of 4 boxes: true positives, where the model correctly predicted the positive class; true negatives, where it correctly predicted the negative class; and then the 2 types of mistakes: false positives, where it predicted positive but was wrong, and false negatives, where it predicted negative but was wrong. This single chart gives you an immediate visual sense of exactly where a model is succeeding and exactly where it's getting confused. From there, we can calculate specific metrics. Accuracy is the simplest. What fraction of all predictions were correct overall? Precision asks a narrower question. Of everything the model labeled as positive, how many of those were actually correct? This matters a lot when false positives are costly. Recall flips the focus. Of everything that was actually positive, how many did the model successfully catch? This matters when missing a true case. A false negative is the expensive mistake, like in medical screening. For situations where your classes are imbalanced, say, far more normal cases than target cases, there's another important metric: the area under the ROC curve, or AUC. This measures how well a model can distinguish between the 2 classes across every possible decision threshold, not just one. An AUC near 1 means excellent separation between classes. An AUC near 0.5 means the model is essentially guessing. And this actually leads to a really important warning, illustrated in the last visual. Imagine a dataset where 950 out of 1,000 samples are non-spam, and only 50 are spam. A lazy model that just predicts non-spam every single time would score a 95% accuracy, which sounds fantastic. But it would be completely useless because it never catches a single actual spam email. That's exactly the kind of blind spot the AUC score catches, since this same lazy model would score an AUC of exactly 0.5, revealing it can't distinguish between the classes at all. This is why relying on one single metric can be seriously misleading, and why combining several metrics gives you a much more honest picture. For regression tasks, we use a different family of metrics, since we're predicting numbers instead of categories. Mean squared error takes the difference between each prediction and its true value, squares it and averages it across all samples. And because it squares the errors, it punishes large mistakes especially harshly. Mean absolute error does something similar, but without squaring, which makes it steadier and less sensitive to extreme outliers. And the coefficient of determination, R squared, measures what proportion of the variation in the data the model is actually able to explain, giving you a score between 0 and 1, where values closer to 1 indicate a model that's making genuinely strong predictions. Overfitting and underfitting. Let's close with 2 very common problems every machine learning practitioner runs into: overfitting and underfitting. Overfitting happens when a model performs beautifully on the training data, very high accuracy, very low loss, but falls apart on new, unseen data. Picture that wiggly curve in the visual, twisting itself around every single training point. It's not learning the underlying pattern, it's memorizing the noise. This usually shows up as a growing gap between training loss, which keeps dropping, and testing loss, which stalls out or even climbs. The fix usually involves regularization techniques, using cross-validation, or training on more diverse data, so the model can't simply memorize its way to a good score. Underfitting is the opposite problem. The model is too simple to capture what's actually going on in the data, so it performs poorly on both the training set and the testing set. Picture that overly straight line in the visual, missing an obvious curve in the data. The fix here is usually to use a more complex model or add more capacity, like more layers in a neural network, so it actually has the power to learn the patterns that are there. The goal, always, is that middle curve in the visual, a model that captures the real underlying pattern in the data without memorizing every tiny quirk of the training set. Summary. So to bring it all together, choosing a model starts with understanding your problem and your data. Training is the iterative process of adjusting a model's parameters to minimize error, using that loop of forward passes, loss calculation, and backward passes. Hyperparameter tuning and cross-validation help you squeeze out better, more reliable performance. And evaluation, using the right combination of metrics, tells you whether your model is genuinely ready for the real world or just good at fooling you on paper. If this helped clear things up, drop a like, subscribe for more machine learning breakdowns like this one, and I'll see you in the next video.